Sally Corkery.
Hi.
Come in close.
Yeah.
Come in close. Sally
in
does
close.
not want to yell.
Well, as Randy said, my name is Sally Corkery, and I'm the daughter of Clayton Webeck. My dad was one of the inductees in 1986 into the Sports Hall of Fame. It's with honor and fond recollection that I tell you some of the tidbits of my dad's life tonight. My father was a tireless volunteer in sports and non-sports. He also made a name for himself by participating in football, basketball, baseball, ice skating, and many more sports. I was told that many of the sports historians in Jamestown felt that my dad and Louis Collins were responsible for promoting most of the sports in Chautauqua County. I can remember on Friday nights going downtown with my dad to a very busy downtown at that time. Our first stop was Peterson's Corn Crib for caramel corn, and the next stop was Louis Collins' Sports Shop, a couple doors down on 3rd Street. We'd go in and sit in the back in the shoe department, my dad and Louis Collins and myself. And my dad and Louis Collins talked and talked and talked about sports. I was probably 9 or 10 at the time. And I can remember thinking, I just want to go home. and now I wish that I could go back and listen to every word they said. But that's the way, I guess, with everything, you know. My dad was one of the original founders of the Jessup, Turner, and Johnson Athletic Club, which then became the Matthew and Miller Athletic Club, and finally the Jock Shop Athletic Club. My dad was on the building committee for the municipal stadium and golf course. Basketball was my dad's favorite sport. He played at Washington Junior High School. I don't know if any of you ever attended Washington Junior High School. You did? But if you did, there was a teacher there, a math teacher, who was an excellent teacher, but he was a little bit quirky, and his name was Claude Parker. My first day at Washington in 7th grade, I sat down, and within 5 minutes of the class, Claude Parker pointed at me. I didn't even know he knew who I was. And he said, I think he used a word I'm not going to use. He said, "Webeck, I had your father, and he was no good, and you won't be either."
Oh!
And I think he said he was no damn good. I didn't say that because I wasn't, I just know that the other part he really did say. Unfortunately, my math skills weren't what they probably should have been, so in that regard he might have been right. And my dad's promotional and organizational skills must have not carried over into the classroom. So that was an interesting thing. I can remember my father sitting at the coffee table in our living room with his typewriter in front of him, typing with one finger. He typed countless pages and pages of correspondence for sporting events and for the March of Dimes. He was the editor of the Viking News and the Polio News. I have scrapbooks made by my dad from the time he was a young man up until the time he passed away. One of those scrapbooks was done on an elite furniture company catalog. And his dad worked there, so that's probably why he had that catalog. But he glued the articles onto those pages. I donated that scrapbook to the Fenton Historical Society, and the gentleman there was more interested in the furniture catalog. I don't think he really cared about the articles my dad had glued in, because he said something to the effect, "We've never really had a good Jamestown furniture before." So, my dad was best known throughout the county and state for his tireless efforts with the March of Dimes. During his 20-year time with the March of Dimes, he was instrumental in organizing the Sabin oral vaccine program in Chautauqua County. Our county had the distinction of being the first county to administer the vaccine on a voluntary basis. He also organized the first Father's March for Blood in the country. In his support of the polio program, my dad visited nearly all of the 650 polio patients in Chautauqua County. During the war years, my dad promoted many all-star attractions to benefit Jamestown men and women in the armed forces. He also compiled a booklet that had the names of all those people in it. And I think that's one of the things that was in the scrapbook I donated to the Fenton. And I think they sold those little booklets. It was just like a 3x5 booklet. It was for something like 35 cents. My father was a captain with the Jamestown Fire Department. He drove the hook and ladder truck, and one day brought that truck down Euclid Avenue to our house. And I was pretty excited about that because all the neighborhood kids gathered around to see the truck. He was also the chairman of the Sesquicentennial Parade in Jamestown. That particular parade drew one of the largest crowds in the history of the city. And he chaired the 50th anniversary of the Jamestown Fire Department. My dad was a man of few words but countless kind deeds and supportive actions. His induction into the Sports Hall of Fame didn't result from his scoring a game-winning touchdown, but rather from helping others to be able to do so. One of the many gifts my dad passed on was his athleticism and the love of the game, whatever that game was. I can see it firsthand today with his 4 great-grandsons. Whether on the volleyball or basketball court, or baseball, lacrosse, or track field, I have seen my father's spark in each of the 4 of them, knowing that their great-grandfather would be so proud. The day my dad died, he said to my mom when he left the house, "I'll be home to see the 3rd game of the World Series." And that day he played in the club championship at Pasadena Country Club. He won the championship that day, but he walked off the 18th green and had a heart attack and passed away. That was over 50 years ago, October 8th of 1962. I just want to say I was very proud to have him for my father, and I thank you for asking me to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's very nice.
Thank you, Sally.
Yes,
Welcome
you're
to
welcome.
join us.
My dad was born in Marysville, Ohio, and he was orphaned at age 8. He was raised by a guardian for a few years, and then by an older sister. I don't really know much about him until he went to Worcester College, and while he was at Worcester College, he was a track star. He set records in the high jump, the long jump, the 120-yard high hurdles, and the 220-yard low hurdles, which that's something they don't even race anymore, is the low hurdles. While he was at Worcester College, he met my mother, and they got married in 1938, shortly after they graduated from Worcester. And then he came, since he really didn't have any real ties out in Ohio other than his sisters, he came back here, and I think he worked for a couple of places in Jamestown. I think maybe Blackstone he might have worked. I don't think he worked at Marlin Rockwell, but then eventually he went into business with my grandfather in the accounting business, and he played a lot of golf. Actually, he didn't play as much golf as a lot of people played. But he was one of his stains was consistency thou art a jewel, and he was very consistent in his golf. A couple of examples: back in those days, and he died in 1970. But back in those days, they had what they called the Chautauqua County Amateur, and it was 36 holes of medal play on the same day, and you got to walk all 36 holes. So he played in it 15 times, and of the 15 times that he played in it, he won it 4 times, came in second 6 times, and of those 6 times, he lost in a playoff 3 times, and never was worse than 5th. He won the Moonbrook Club Championship in 23 tries. He won it 12 times and came in second 4 times. In 1959, he set the at that time the amateur course record of 66. He was really sort of an easygoing golfer. He didn't mind his regular foursome were all guys that were high handicappers. In fact, the day that he shot the 66, his best friend said, "I shot a 66 too, except it was upside down, 99." And it was also his first time forever breaking 100, you know. So, but that's the kind of people that, you know, and some golfers think that it hurts their game to play with high handicappers, and they don't like to play with them, but it didn't bother his game. He played well. He told me that he normally broke 70 at Moonbrook 3 to 6 times a year, and it seems like I've got a lot of clippings. It seems like a lot of his best rounds were when there was the most pressure. You know, like the club championship one year, and I was in college at the time, and I missed it. But they played 2 rounds of match play, and they got down to 4 players, and they played 36 holes of medal play. And he shot a 72 in the morning and a 67 in the afternoon to win the club championship. I mean, and I just think about. I remember one time when I was playing golf, and the club championship then was 54 holes, and at the end of with 9 holes to go, I think I was 1 stroke out of the lead, and at the end with 9 holes to go, and show you how well I handle the pressure. I had a 37 on the front 9 and a nice 44 on the back. So that was my best hope. Let's see if there's anything that I missed. Players, they would play in the Buffalo district, and they would go up, and there was and I don't know if they still have it, there was a team championship where they played 4-ball. They played 2, the 2 players would play best ball, but the Moonbrook players won it several times, and I know that my father played in all of those, and he told me they really didn't like this country bumpkins from Jamestown to come up and win something up in Buffalo. Of course, all of you, if you're from Jamestown, you know that they also, the Buffalo, they don't like Jamestown winning, going up there and beating out the Buffalo schools either. So you know how that was. So, any questions for anybody?
Steve, is the club championship for men?
The ladies club championship 5 times at Moonbrook. They used to play a lot of golf together. They'd go out in the afternoon, and if they didn't get held up, they would play. They'd play 18 holes in less than 3 hours. You know, of course, I like to play fast. You know, all these people. You know, I don't understand why my father.
First
yeah, he played in 1959. He played with Art Wall and Arnold Palmer in an exhibition, and in that exhibition, Arnold Palmer shot a 68. Art Wall had a 69. My dad had a 70, and Toby Lyons, who was the pro up there, had a 73. In fact, one of the nice part on the 18th hole, my father chipped in for a birdie, which was kind of exciting. So I remember that because I caddied for him. So.
Nice. What's your handicap?
Right now, 16. My golf game's gone to pot.
What were you at your best?
Best was 3.
Wow.
Yeah, that was the year that year after we got married, and my wife was still going to college, and she was going up to Fredonia for night school 3 times a week, and so she didn't get home till 9 o'clock, so I had to play golf. Consequently, my game improved for that 1 year, and I played a lot of years with a single digit, 7, 8, 9.
Presenting John tonight is Scott Kinberg, the assistant sports editor at the Post-Journal and also a member of the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame Board of Directors.
Well, it's really a pleasure for me to do this tonight. 2 years ago, Randy Anderson and I went and visited John at the nursing home, and I was able to do a story in anticipation of the 70th anniversary of Municipal Stadium, which became College Stadium and is now Dietrich Park. So what I did, I decided I'd take this column that I wrote and just this pretty much summarizes John's accomplishments. This column appeared in the Post-Journal on July 26, 2011. John O'Neill took off his sweater Monday morning and was handed a white uniform top with Falcons emblazoned in red letters on the chest and the number 1 on the back. He carefully buttoned the jersey and then stood up so all could see his new threads. You know what? I'm going to sit down if you don't mind. As the 91-year-old posed for photographs near the dining room of Emeritus of Lakewood, which is on Southwestern Drive, O'Neill's navy blue baseball cap, complete with a red J on the front, was pulled down on his forehead, just the way it must have been during his professional days, or his professional playing days, which began, believe it or not, in the 1930s. But the cap's bill couldn't hide the smile on his face that day, and Randy will attest to that, or the twinkle in his eye. He was the lone surviving member of the first professional team to call Jamestown's Municipal Stadium home, and he was beginning a week-long trip down memory lane, and he seemed to be enjoying every minute of it. He told me, "I'm honored." O'Neill grew up in Kentucky and played minor league baseball in 1939 and 40 in such outposts as Tallahassee, Greenville, Winston-Salem, and Bristol, before arriving in Jamestown in 1941 in its brand new ballpark. John was an all-star shortstop, and he helped the Falcons to the Pony League title that season. The stadium was filled to capacity virtually every game, and the Falcons rarely disappointed their fans. John told me we'd go down to the park about 5 or 5:30 for pregame practice, and there would be so many people there that we'd have trouble getting in. Powered by players, names like Johnny Newman, Frank Carswell, Frank Heller, Earl Rapp, and John Pollock, the Falcons made an evening on Faulkner Street quite a happening. John said if we needed runs, we had 6 or 7 kids who could hit the ball out of the joint. He said I could hit, but I couldn't hit it very far. Still, he left quite an impression and was voted by the fans as the team's most popular player that season. So what was originally thought to be a 1-year hiatus in Jamestown turned into a lifetime love affair with the community. And while his baseball career spanned 6 decades as a player, he was a member of the Philadelphia Phillies in '46. He was also a manager, a general manager, and a scout. But his permanent home never changed. Eventually, O'Neill married the former Jeanette Swanson, and they had a daughter, Bonnie. "I stole one of the Jamestown girls for my wife," he told me that day. In July or early August of 2011 was the 70th anniversary of Dietrich Park. And to commemorate the anniversary, our Hall of Fame purchased replica jerseys, which, and the day this column ran, John wore that with his hat, and he just really loved it. I can't believe it, he told me. The stadium was brand new, and to me, it still hasn't changed. So in a 45-year career that included 1,850 games as a player and countless games as a manager, general manager, and scout. By the way, did you know he signed Mike Scioscia, who's the manager of the Angels in 1976. He also signed several other players, including Bill Robinson, who played with the Yankees and the Phillies, and so he was quite an outstanding baseball man in every way. Asked what he planned to do with his throwback uniform top, O'Neill told Randy and I he was going to hang it in his room at Emeritus next to his Phillies jersey. And that was only appropriate. After spending half an hour with him, I came away convinced that while playing in the major leagues in Philadelphia provided him with his biggest professional thrill, being part of Jamestown's long and storied baseball history is pretty close. He told me Jamestown is #1. I played in some good towns, but not like Jamestown. John O'Neill, born April 19th, 1920, died April 18th, 2012. Peace be to his memory.
Any questions for Scott about Johnny O'Neill? Well done, Scott.
Thanks. Actually, my dad, I think, saw John play at down at Municipal Stadium, because my dad used to be a concession kid back then. So I think he had some memories of John and those guys. Of course, John Newman, he talked about all the time. So it was real special to me to actually see John when Randy and I went to visit him a couple years ago, and he had quite a good memory. Heck, he was 91 years old, but remembered a lot of his baseball experiences. It was really special.
I think I attribute it to that can of beer he had every afternoon at 4 o'clock.
I didn't put that in there.
Every afternoon, 4 o'clock. We're at the gravesite of John Henry Newman. Presenting information about John is his son, Jeff Newman.
Welcome to this segment of the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame Cemetery Tour. My name is Jeff Newman, and I'll be speaking today about John Newman, aka the Big John, Sultan of SWAT, the Blonde Bomber, Butch the Blaster, or as most of you know him, just as Johnny. He was born December 20th, 1913, Chicago, Illinois. He was a two-sport athlete in high school, one being baseball, the other being football. He liked football, had the opportunity to play for the Bears, but chose baseball because that was his love. But during the off-season, he played for a semi-pro team called the Chicago Spokes, until the Cardinals found out, put an end to that immediately. His baseball career started in 1935. He started as a player, ended as a player-manager in Hamilton, Ontario. He had a love for the game and was a real student of the game, and would share what he knew about the game with anybody and all who would listen. When I was little, he would ask me questions. What are you going to do if the ball's hit to you? Guys on second and third, one out. What are you going to do? Guys first and third, no outs. Or he'd say to me, counts 0-2, what are you looking for? Counts 3-0, what are you looking for? He'd say, you always have to think ahead to make sure you're ready, because it's going to happen. He managed Little League and Babe Ruth teams for years. The old names for the current Bambino League now. I can remember coming and going to games all the time. We were either at the Falcons game, or Little League games, or Babe Ruth games. Car was always full of kids, never a day that there wasn't baseball equipment in the back of that car. He really loved coaching the kids and watching them develop into older ball players. He did some amazing things while playing ball here and other places, but you'd never know. He was a humble man. People that were close to him and played with him called him the gentleman's gentleman. I can remember him telling ball players at practices, hi there. Don't forget, guys, no matter how good you are, there's always somebody better. He says you have to work at this game to be good at it, but don't forget it is a game and you should have fun. He was always known for hitting home runs wherever he played, but he also hit for average, being a career 300 hitter. While playing in Jamestown in 1941, he hit .358 with 29 home runs. And in 1942, he hit .353 with 30 home runs. He was also a fun-loving joker as well. Most of the stories I've either heard from other people or I've read from the articles that were printed. He once rode a bike from the dugout to left field, leaned it against the fence, at the end of the inning, rode it back in. On a bet that he wouldn't do it, he climbed one of the light standards down at the stadium for some money from somebody. But the best story, but there's a lot of them, but the best one I like is he was managing Hamilton. He and his team were here in Jamestown for a game. There was a crowd of kids out front. All of them wanted to be bat boy. So one little kid says, hey, I'll do it for free. I just want to see the game. And he says, oh, we're going to see the game. Takes his equipment bag, dumps it on the ground, says, everybody grab a bat, and let's go. So they start for the entry. Out comes the GM and says, hey, Johnny, what do you think you're doing with all these kids? We can't have this. He said, listen, I got to have my equipment. No equipment, no game. Off they went, all of them, into the game. Obviously, one more story was one when my dad was at bat. The pitch would be a strike. He'd turn around and go, boy, that was a good pitch. And the umpire, they'd boo. And the umpire would say, Jesus, don't do that. Sure enough, next pitch, another strike, he'd turn around, that was better than the last pitch. Johnny, they're going to kill me if you don't stop doing that. He said, obviously I didn't get any size from my dad at all. When I was younger, my dad told me the story of the day I was born. He said, I went down to the nursery. I said to the nurse, hey, where's my boy? He's looking through all of them. He says, no, Johnny, he's over here. He took one look in there and said, hey, you better take him back. He's not done yet. As I started playing ball myself, coaches and managers would say the same thing to me. Hey, are you related to Johnny Newman? And I'd say, yeah. I was excited. Yeah, it's my dad. And they'd say, can you hit like him? The dreaded question. The answer was always the same, no. But I can run like a rabbit, I tell them. And they'd all say the same thing. Hey, listen, if you could hit like your old man, you could just try. After his career ended in Hamilton, Ontario, he came back to Jamestown, made it our home. He took a job driving a bus for Jamestown City Bus Company, and it put him in an element that was perfect for him. He was surrounded by people all day long. He really fell in love with Jamestown while he was here playing and stayed here until he passed. Jamestown was very good to him. On August 15th, 1941, he was given the keys to the city, which included everything from the mayor all the way down to the dog catcher. And on August 11th, 1964, he was recognized again by the Jamestown City Bus Company and the Detroit Tigers, who were the farm team here at the time, and sponsored the second Johnny Newman night at the stadium. To this day, people are still talking about the stuff that Johnny Newman did when he played ball here. One story being that he hit a home run over the left field light tower. The tower's 340 feet from home plate, and the ball landed 250 feet past the tower. Two fans ran out there, found the ball, said it wasn't real wet, figured the ball traveled over 600 feet on the fly. I asked him once, Dad, how long was the longest home run you ever hit? He looked at me for a second. He said, 20 miles. I said, what? He said, well, there was a coal train going by. I hit the ball, landed on the coal train, and away it went. He just laughed and walked away. He didn't, it's just the way it was. I think this tour today is a celebration of Jamestown's rich athletic history, and I appreciate you listening to stories about my dad, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the tour. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Jeff?
Yeah, did he ever used to smoke a stogie?
No, chewed tobacco.
Chew tobacco.
By the pack.
Okay.
The whole thing sometimes.
Thank you very much.
W. Feather, and presenting tonight is his wife, Verna Feather.
Hello. Ooh, black cat.
He's been with us.
Oh, he has. Oh, that's okay, but okay. Well, I want to say that first and foremost, Dan was a fine human being with a Christian character. If he hadn't been, I would never have married him. He was humble, but strong. He had a keen sense of humor and wit. It seemed like he had a story for every occasion. It just fit right in there. And I was always envious because I wanted to remember them, and I could use that sometime. But I didn't remember as well as he did. But he had that about him. And there were always clean jokes. Always clean jokes. Andy Johnson, who was the chief of police for many years, said this about Dan. Dan lived a happy, peaceful life that he was proud of and comfortable with. A happy, peaceful life that he was proud of and comfortable with. How many of us can say that about our lives? His sports achievements, his physical fitness, and his distinguished police career followed his character. Dan, unfortunately, died at the age of 44 after suffering a brain aneurysm. If he was alive today, he would be 66. And, you know, by coincidence, 66 was his badge number at the JPD. Just thought about that the other day when I was writing this up. Dan was a natural, but a dedicated competitor. If you list all of his trophies, his medals, his awards, plaques and everything, you'll end up with 11 pages. 11 pages. It all began with running in 5th grade. He never stopped running. And he was registered to compete in the Police Olympics the year that he died. And they're always held in May. And he, of course, passed away in May earlier that month. But he was a competitive runner for 34 years. 34 years. At JHS, he led the track team to an undefeated season in 1965 as a senior. And Joe, you probably remember that. I think Joe was a classmate of Dan's. Mm-hmm. Then Dan went on to JCC, where he ran track and cross country, and he was voted one of JCC's 50 greatest athletes. And I have that plaque at home. He went on to Buff State to finish his college career, and while there he set school records. Jerry Pollock, who was a classmate of Dan's at Buff State, and came from Long Island to college in Buffalo, said, and I quote this, "Dan was the most versatile athlete he's ever known." Dan ran the half mile, the quarter mile, he did the intermediate hurdles, the high jump, and all kinds of relays. He anchored the 2-mile relay team that earned all-state honors at Buff State. And he was the captain of the track team. Then moving on, after college, getting a job, JPD, he continued to run. He continued to participate in the Police Olympics, both the state and the internationals. And you had to place in the top 3 in the state in order to advance to the internationals. And Dan won 33 medals in the Police Olympics. And this is what they look like. All on red, white, and blue, just like the official Olympics that we watch on TV. And this is a photo of him where he won 2 medals that year in uniform also. In 1993, I gave whoever was in charge of the Sports Hall of Fame 11 of the international medals that Dan had won. And 3 of those were ones that he had won in the winter biathlon at Lake Placid. The winter biathlon is cross-country skiing. Put on those skis, those poles, and put on your gun, you know, or your holster, and head out into the woods in this designated trail, and then you come back in and you shoot at targets, 5 shots, and any that you miss, you have to ski a penalty lap at this circle before you go out into the woods in your next round. And Dan had to do that. He had to do that once. He missed 1 target, so he had to ski the 1 penalty lap. And he won those 3 golds, first place, in 2 days. One day they had 2 biathlons they had to do. And it was so cold, I remember, that one of the other ladies that was there with her husband, he was a law officer, and her camera froze up. It was that cold. And she asked me if I would send her photos after the events were over and everything. And Dan wouldn't even let me go and ski Whiteface Mountain. He said it's too cold. So we didn't get the downhill ski either. But we did cross-country ski, and he won all those medals there. Dan also, in his free time, otherwise, he did triathlons. Triathlons are swimming, bicycling, and then running. And he did them up in Bemis Point, Warren, Edinburgh. He did pentathlons up in Buffalo. And after he met me, I got him into cross-country skiing. I knew he'd be good at that because he's a runner, he liked the outdoors, he was a hunter, and we did the ski marathons. They used to have them here in Chautauqua County, the 55K. When they stopped having them here, we went up to Tug Hill, and Tug Hill still has them. They're 50K up there. And if you have the translation there, you know it's about 30 miles on skis. Doing circles or out in Chautauqua used to have one big long trail that you had to do. So he did that and got medals for that. And these are the Chautauqua County cross-country marathon medals. And these are the Tug Hill ones. Then, along with the police work, Dan got into pistol shooting with the law enforcement. He would go to many competitions, locally, state, region, into Canada, and even down to the Secret Service down in Washington, D.C. And he also taught at the academy here, the future law enforcement people. Usually came back with something, either first, second, or third, or a merchandise or something. He was very, very good. And the last thing he got into was road bicycling. And the Police Olympics do have a road bicycling event. And he did enter that in Albany one year. But another thing about Dan was that he was very generous in sharing his knowledge and his skill with others. He wanted people to participate, to be successful, and he wanted to help them and coach them in any way that he could. First he worked with the teens, and then he would do the same thing with adults. And the teens, in 1979, he and Ron Graham co-founded the Chautauqua Valley Athletic Club. And that, over the years, evolved into the Striders. And Dan said that when he was patrolling around town, he would see these teens just hanging out, doing nothing. And wouldn't it be nice if they had something to do, some place to go, some place to focus, and be successful? So he said that's why he started that. That's why he got into that. And I can tell you a story about how the teens respected Dan and how they felt about him. When I worked at the high school, I was a library media specialist. I had an aide who was married, and they had children. They had boys and one daughter. And she said, you know, we always like to have the kids at home at night rather than them out somebody else's house or whatever. We always knew where they were. And she said, one night, I overheard my boys talking. And she told this to me after Dan had passed away. She came to me and she said, Verna, I think I need to tell you a story. So she said, you know, those guys were talking and they said, don't mess with that Dan Feather. If he's on duty, don't do anything bad because he'll stop that car, he'll change his shoes, he'll get those tennis shoes on, and he'll run after you and he'll catch you. That's how good he is. That shows respect, you know, for him. And later on, as he was competing, you know, in shooting and in running and everything, he had a lot of talks with the other guys too. And one of the things that I noticed when I went with him on a lot of the shooting that he did, he even made bullets for competitors. Dan made his own bullets. He always said, I want them all to be the same amount of powder, the same amount of shot and everything in it. They'll all shoot the same. So Al Rostick, I know from Canada, he's one that Dan made bullets for. Even though they were competing, you know, for prizes and merchandise and everything, he just wanted to share it and wanted the guy to do good. So he was a good teacher and he was a good motivator. And even the later years that he ran in the Police Olympics, he would run in the open class. He said he'd rather come in second and have somebody to, run against than be way ahead of everybody else and not even be a race. So he did that. And let me check my notes and see if there's anything else I want to tell you. 1993, Dan was inducted in the Sports Hall of Fame after he had passed away. I always said it would be good if he had been entered before he passed, and it would have been an honor. But he is remembered every year in many ways. The Striders each year have the race walk Labor Day weekend, and the JPD have a pistol match, which is a memorial to Dan, every summer down at the Jamestown Rifle Club. And I give a scholarship at the Police Academy every fall. It is picked by the director of the academy. It is awarded to the graduate who has the skills and the character that Dan had. And then the Canadians, we went to Canada for a lot of pistol matches, and they always came down here. One of the reasons I liked to come down here was the cheap beer. But the Canadians always give a trophy in their fall provincial championships in memory of Dan. They give it to the top shooter in his memory. And Dan was a high master shooter. He was in that class, and that's the highest class that there is. So he was good, and it's wonderful that he's remembered in many ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any
Any
questions?
questions for Verna?
Verna, did you see the recent success of the Striders at the Junior Nationals here a few weeks ago? They had several All-Americans, and one girl finished just second, McKenna Maycock. She in the
No, I didn't see that.
400 intermediate hurdle, intermediate hurdle. She finished second in the nation at her age.
When you talk about the beginnings of the Chautauqua Striders, Dan had run with Ronnie Graham on the Jamestown track team, and when he joined the police force, as you said, he went to Ronnie and called him up and said, "Ron, I'm tired of I'm tired of running after these kids. I would rather run with them." And that was the beginnings of this concept of Chautauqua Striders. Another quick story, when you talk about chasing people down, once Dan was in a patrol car chasing a guy on a motorcycle who went down Curtis Street towards the 100-acre lot, and he pulled his motorcycle in, and there's trails, and this was at night. And Dan was right behind him. The guy pulled into the 100-acre lot, and he figured, I'm home free. He can't get me here. Dan jumped out of the car and ran through the woods and finally got right up next to the guy and pushed him like that and knocked him over. And then the guy's laying there like, where did you come from? And he said, your ride is over. There's stories. There's lots of stories.
Thank you, Mal.
Welcome.
Appreciate it.
This is the cross country.
We're at the gravesite of Anthony Tony Lavoie. Presenting Anthony tonight is Bruce Wyden. Bruce is a former teacher in the Jamestown Public School System, and he is a volunteer at the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame.
Okay. Well, it's my pleasure tonight to be here for Tony. He's probably a man that has touched more lives within the confines of the age group, maybe from 35 to 60 here in Jamestown, than any other person that I could perhaps recognize, because he was the aquatic director at the Jamestown Boys Club for almost 22 years. Tony was born June 16th, 1930 in Providence, Rhode Island. He was a graduate of Providence Schools. He was also at that time a swimmer for the Providence Schools and has a championship record that still stands for the 440 in the Northeast. In 1951, he was drafted by and went into the Marines. He spent 2 years with the Marines and then came out, went to New York University, and became an instructor in aquatic, I guess you would call it finesse. He was first employed by the Providence Boys Club, and in 1957 came to Jamestown, where he was to spend the next 22 years working with our youth in the city here. One of the things that I think we can mention about Tony that was unique and different was that he developed a lot of programs for not only youth but adults, and he was on the forefront for handicapped youth and also mentally challenged people as well. So long before it became evident that America was on the bandwagon, Tony had developed some things right here in the Jamestown area for our mentally and physically challenged. A good friend of mine and a colleague of Tony's, Bill Rellinger, often had nothing but praise for Tony's programs. He said that they were the forerunner of his successes at the high school. So many times the students who started with Tony's program, and worked their way through to the senior and junior high had come out of Tony's tutorship. Bill also said that he and Tony traveled extensively throughout the Northeast to meets and things like that. And oftentimes they went with limited funds. And many a time they would pack 10, 12 people in a motel room. They would tear the mattresses off the bed springs and set the kids down. Because many of the kids didn't have the monies to make it happen, Tony oftentimes dug into his own pocket to make it happen for those kids. He was a true mentor to those who were around him. A few Tony stories. It's said that at the Boys Club, Tony Lavoie could drink a bottle of 16-ounce Pepsi underwater without stopping. I don't know if that's true or not. I've also heard that he could float motionless in a pool at the club for up to 30 minutes without even causing a ripple. Tony Lavoie ran a very family-oriented program, and one last story I want to share with you is a comment that a good friend of mine, Adina Woodard, made. She had started taking her children to the Boys Club in the late 50s, maybe early 60s, when Tony first arrived on the scene. And at that time, a black African-American was not unique to Jamestown, but fairly unique. And because it was a family night, she had been there with her children, and anyway, her daughter Judy came over and tapped Mr. Lavoie on the shoulder and simply looked at him and said, "Mr. Lavoie, how come you're a different color?" And Adina was like, oh my goodness, how could my daughter do this? And Tony simply looked at Judy and said, Judy, he said, look out at this pool. We've probably got what? Maybe 75 to 100 people, all the way from youngsters to elderly senior citizens in the pool. If you were to need help right now, and you were to look around for that help, look at me. See me? You're going to remember me because I'm the one that's going to help you. So he had a very easy way of addressing the problem, simplifying the situation, and Adina was forever thankful for that. Tony retired from the Boys Club in 1977. That year a lot of tributes came his way. A Tony Lavoie Day was proclaimed by Mayor Stephen Carlson. There was a banquet held in his honor. And to this day, the Jamestown High School still awards a Tony Lavoie Swim Award to their members. I do have one quote from Tony himself. When asked for his own recipe for success, Tony replied, "What's the secret for success with kids?" He replied, "Instilling in the youngsters the desire to work, to improve without driving them too hard. Many fine swimming candidates have been ruined by someone pressing them much too hard." That's a thoughtful comment that he made. Tony died March 1st, 1983, and so in the honor of this man, I think who contributed a great deal to not only the youth, but the adults and the handicapped of our area. So, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. My name's Jerry Nagel. I'm the third grandson. This is my mother, Janice. She's the only daughter-in-law, the favorite daughter-in-law, and this is one of her best friends over the years. So I'd like to take a few minutes and tell you about his relationship with a game of baseball. And you have to understand that most everything in his life revolved around baseball. And a couple of quotes. I saw him play back during his prime, an old-timer once told Frank Hyde. He was no bigger than a pint, but he had a quick bat and could kill you with a long ball despite his lack of weight and size. He hit a first pitch home run off of Grover Cleveland Alexander early in Alexander's career with the Homestead Grays, which was a touring AAA team. And of course, folks may remember that Alexander went on to play pro ball and was an MVP in the 26 World Series Cardinals. You have to understand, my grandfather stood 5'4" and weighed about 140. I remember him closer to 5'2", but there's just a bit of exaggeration there. So he was born April 15th, 1900 in Patton, Pennsylvania, and he started playing serious baseball in his early teens. He left the family farm around 16, went into the coal mines, eventually ending up as a semi-pro catcher in Grass Flat, Pennsylvania, playing for the Grass Flats. That was 1920, when in addition to playing ball, he also managed to meet the butcher's daughter, one of many I might add, and in Grass Flat, and a few years later, 1925, he married Ethel Gustafson on St. Patty's Day. You'll note that this is before the baseball season started. Right? So they promptly moved to Jamestown, where she had family, and he found work in the factories. Again, this was 25. But baseball and Ethel were his loves, and he soon found himself working baseball nearly full-time during the season with those substantial teams of the day, including Billy Webb's Spiders from 1928 to 1932. He moved from catching to third base by now. He was very quick. He had a strong arm. He had great hand-eye coordination. And they played the AAA road teams of the day, the Boston Braves, the Homestead Grays, the Palmer House Giants, the Crawfords of Pittsburgh. And these teams demanded a $2,000 guarantee, so $1930, $2,000, to play the local clubs on their sort of whirlwind barnstorming tours. So, by the way, the Spiders beat the Braves on August 6th, tomorrow, 1930, 3-0, 90 degrees, Celeron Park. There were 1,781 folks in attendance at $1 a game, or $1 plus, and in the article it said that they made $200 after the payment of the guarantee. The sports writers were very busy during the day and had busier evenings, and I can remember growing up the discussions with Frank Hyde and Wade Forsythe and Ford Swanson, all of the folks who carried on with the factory leagues. So after the Spiders, there were many employers looking for Joe's talents, the recruitment of the day. This was the national pastime, even more so in Chautauqua County. There was a short season, there was plenty of talent, there was pride of county, state, and country. He played for the teams like National Forge, Salisbury Axle, Jamestown Chair, Marlin Rockwell, Art Metal, Hope's Windows, and especially the Jamestown Steel Petition. The Bombers, make no mistake, in the 1940s, and it was all about the Bombers as a player, about the factory, and their new coach, Joe Nagel. He retired as a player in 1946 because of, as he put it, encroaching years and loss of power. So he always had a nice way of saying things. He was never harsh, but you never misunderstood the message. As a grandson, I never misunderstood the message. He was the manager of a very good team. He had a very good foundation to begin with, and he took them forward to multiple state championships in the post-war years. The pennants that they received were in multiple leagues at the same time, the Pony League, the Muni AA, the Penn York. And these guys, the teams, the Travelers, my father, Don, Joe's dad, Joe, his cousin, Bob, these guys played hard. They traveled hundreds of miles each year. So in 1946, as an example, their total record was 67 games. They were 60-6 with a tie. So double leagues, Jamestown, Salamanca, Corry, Chautauqua, South Dayton, Asheville. So I'm a little bit suspicious of the tie in baseball. I don't know if they lost the balls. It was too dark, they had another game, or the umps finally gave up. I'm not quite sure. He continued to coach the factory teams and develop some very good players through the 40s and the 50s, and he finally retired around 1958, and baseball was behind him, or so we thought. He and my grandmother did what every other 60-year-old couple did. They kept on working, and they bought a corner grocery store. Nagel's Grocery at 1110 Newland Avenue, where I grew up. And it became a hub for former and current players, and it was very active in the fall season during the Major League Baseball playoffs. There were all sorts of charts, scoring summaries, very special cigar boxes that I was not allowed to touch. I think there was some cash in those boxes, I'm not quite sure. And they were all very well organized, and there was a lot of traffic in the back room keeping track of these summaries. I thought it was for groceries, bread and milk, and cold cuts. It was for a Jenny cream and a little bit check on the cigar box. So during this time, he and his buddy started talking about bringing back the old team for a little intramural game. And so it was in 1964 that Joe Nagel and Maury Mistretta organized the baseball old timers. The blue and red team played at College Stadium every summer primarily as a fundraiser for the youth baseball in the county. They sold tickets for admission. They gave away bats, mini bats, if maybe some of you remember those. They auctioned off a bull. I'm not quite sure.
Wow.
I'm not quite sure this would go nowadays. But this is, and it was all to raise funds for the kids. So it was the minor league, the little league, the Babe Ruth, just emerging for the grounds, for the uniforms, for the players, for everything. So they had an extraordinary network of friends and family and fans who would just come out and play with these guys and watch these guys, the Reds and the Blues, and even complete with Joe Nelbone, one of the umps from the Old Timers. So over the years, the old timers, their game became ever shorter, maybe 3 innings at most, with plenty of pinch runners, usually grandsons and granddaughters. Even then, these guys were way ahead of their time. Everybody was, anybody who had fresh legs could run for their grandfather. But these guys were smiling and talking and chewing snuff and laughing. You can just, in the dugout, you could just see how much they loved the game, even at the slower pace, and the fire burned, and their arms were a little weaker and their legs were a little slower, and as my grandfather would say, the encroachment of age caught up with us, but they were players nonetheless. So, thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions for Jerry? Or his mom? Any questions for Mrs. Nagel?
Yep, right on top. Right? Okay.
Jerry, what was your grandpa's nickname? I know he had one.
Well, there are a few of them. The Little Gray Fox,
Yeah.
Little Joe, Sir, Coach, yes sir. Arthur, he was Arthur Joseph in Pennsylvania, but here he was Joe, because they had another Joe Nagel in Pennsylvania, so the families had to distinguish between the two. So there he was Arthur, here he was Joseph. Uncle Art, right? So we had a great time. It was a great family and fun, but it was all about baseball. That's my dad, my cousins.
And this is your dad here.
This is my dad.
And
that's no rush.
no rush.
And then her parents and
Oh,
more
is that right?
cousins.
These are your parents.
This is the whole my whole clan.
Oh.
So both my parents were only children, and both of the children will be buried next to the mother. So they had to switch things here, so you can tell.
I get it. All right.
So it was a fun family. The grocery store, the baseball, the old timers. There are a couple funny stories. There was a father-son game back in the late 40s. My grandfather had moved to third base. There was a big picture in the Post-Journal years and years ago. My dad slid into third, my grandfather tagged him out, and my dad ended up breaking his leg.
That's a hard